Seeing how my predictions video on the MCU seems to be one of the most popular videos I've done in years, I guess that's the kind of thing people want to see, so I think it's worth talking about DC as well. I just watched Batman v Superman on the 11th. It's actually the first time I've been to the cinema on my own, and it wasn't a great film to do that with. It was quite long and boring and not great, and I think this particular movie being not so great is probably the worst film that could be this bad, because one has to consider that also coming out this year, Captain America Civil War. Roughly a month apart, these two films have the same basic plot of the two big superheroes from that universe fighting each other. And I've not heard about any outrage or negativity from Civil War. There are some reviews out, but I've not actually had a chance to look at them yet. But regardless, it's worth noting that with how abysmal the critical reception to Batman v Superman was, as long as Captain America Civil War isn't seen as being that bad, and especially if it's seen as actually a really good film, then I think the DC Cinematic Universe is basically just dead in the water. There is no hope for it. Because it's easy enough to say, well, the first two Marvel films were better than the first two DC films. It's easy to say that, but when you have two films that are very similar, that makes for a very easy comparison piece. All of a sudden the flaws of the DC Cinematic Universe are really brought to the forefront. And I think the key difference really between the Marvel and DC Cinematic Universes is that Marvel lets their heroes be themselves. They let Iron Man be Iron Man. They let Thor be Thor, Captain America be Captain America. But DC, it kind of tried to make Superman into Batman, and even Batman is not Batman. Batman is... well, it feels like when someone suggested, hey, let's look to Frank Miller's work and draw inspiration from that, Zack Snyder and David Goyer kind of looked at that and said, yeah, that's a really good idea. Draw from All-Star Batman and Robin. Because that's what Batman in this movie feels like. He doesn't feel like Batman, he feels like Crazy Steve from All-Star Batman and Robin. This is effectively All-Star Batman versus Superman. Because Batman shoots people. Batman is like the one person who should never shoot people. You know, the guy whose entire life is defined by the time his parents were killed with a gun. And this isn't even a fact that's forgotten about. They actually show this at the start of the movie. They remember, they know the moment that defines Batman's life, and yet he's still going around fucking shooting people. Even Superman murders people. Now, there's a guy at the start who's holding Lois Lane captive. Superman flies at the guy with surely the force of a fucking freight train, smashing him through a wall. They don't say the guy's dead, but it's obvious the guy is fucking dead. And yes, the Avengers do kill people, granted, but at the very least this fact is actually brought up by Ultron, and the people being killed are like evil alien invaders and terrorists and that. And sure, some of the stuff could maybe be justified, but I still feel like of all the superheroes, the ones who make the least sense killing people are Batman and Superman. You know, you look at something like, say, Batman Arkham City, where Batman makes a point that he will try to save the Joker, of all people. The Joker, he's like, yes, I would have tried to save you. It's like, the big issue really is that DC, the people in charge of the DC film universe, don't get the characters. They want to make everything extreme, like it's the fucking 90s or something. But you don't want those people. You want people who appreciate the source material. See, it's the same reasoning for why there's so few good video game movies. It's not because of, the lack of interactivity or anything, or because the game stories are crap. No, it's because the people making the movies don't care about the source material. When you have someone with a passion for the source material, like, say, Peter Jackson with The Lord of the Rings, you can get fantastic movies. I mean, obviously it takes more than just passion. You need to be a good filmmaker as well, but the passion is an important part of the equation, you know? And without that, when you assign this whole thing to people who think these comics aren't extreme enough, everything needs to be dark and people need to be killed constantly and there needs to be all this destruction, it's so cool, great visuals. That's not the kind of people you want directing the Superman movie. Superman, the quintessential superhero, one of the most iconic fictional characters of all time. If you're going to get someone who doesn't care for the source material and thinks Superman is lame or not edgy enough, of course the movie's gonna be crap. What do you expect? Honestly, at this point, there's not much hope for the DC Cinematic Universe. The actors do a fine job. I mean, I can't necessarily say if Ben Affleck plays a good Batman because this is not Batman. But I feel like the actors are mostly fine. I mean, obviously, this version of Lex Luthor is really shit, and calling him Lex Luthor Jr. all of once does not cover up the fact that this guy was clearly supposed to be the Lex Luthor. But other than that, I think the actors are generally fine. I wouldn't mind, honestly, for those actors to stick around with a rebooted universe. I think a reboot is actually the best way to go here. If it was up to me, I would probably just do one more movie, just one, after Suicide Squad, and have that be the end of this. This is kind of the trilogy, you know? The Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman trilogy. Conclude that there, start over from scratch. Now, I don't know how many actors would be willing to basically do the same stories again. Like, if you tried to keep the same cast, what are the chances Russell Crowe's going to say, yeah, I'll come back and do the whole destruction of Krypton again? Not likely. But I honestly think that a reboot is the best way to go. I appreciate that they tried to do things differently from how Marvel's doing it, a different tone, and doing it in a different style rather than everyone getting their own film, then doing the crossover and splitting into phases like that. I do still feel like copying Marvel a bit more is probably the right way to go. And some might say, well, then the films wouldn't be as distinct and unique compared to Marvel. And while that's true, at the very least, even if the films weren't all that unique, they would at least be good. And really, at this point, isn't that the most important thing? If you're at all curious about how I would personally approach a DC cinematic universe, down in the description I've got a link to my pitch on DeviantArt. The whole thing is divided into 3 phases like Marvel, and while I wouldn't necessarily say that this is the ideal way of approaching things, I can't imagine many people would disagree that it's a better approach than what we've got now. Still, ultimately that's for you to decide. If you feel like checking it out, please do. And if you've not seen it, my predictions about the Marvel movies might interest you, you know? It'll certainly be cool to keep coming back to that video every few years to see just how accurate I was compared to what actually comes out. But I think it's safe to say that the one prediction I have for the Marvel movies that will come true is that they're going to be a hell of a lot better than what DC puts out. I'm just saying.